Hi, guys. So happy you could join us today. I'm really thrilled to be joined by a repeat speaker. Tracy was awesome because she has done one of the sessions for our military spouse summits before. So if you've been here before, you will remember Tracy. And she works for the federal government. And so we knew that when we were doing these spouse highlights, she was someone that we really wanted to highlight. And I'm so thrilled that worked out because, I mean, she's in Hawaii. When I last spoke to her, she was in Germany. So she is a woman on the move. And Tracy is an Army spouse. And Tracy, last time I spoke to you, you were in Germany and you were working with the NIH. And so now you're with a whole other agency. So can you talk to us a little bit about where you are now and what you're doing?
Course. So I didn't move very far. I am now a staff div or a staff division within the Department of Health and Human Services. So NIH is an operating division. So I just moved from an operating division to a staff division within HHS. I'm a lead talent management specialist, and I work in the Office of the Assistant Secretary for Health. And right now I'm leading some global recruitment efforts and some corporate recruitment efforts, trying to, diversify our reach of talent and increase the quality of our talent pools. And I'm so happy to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
No, it's our pleasure. And I mean, you're the exact right person to have in that position because I know what an advocate you are for hiring veterans and military spouses. So it's good news for our community. And I guess when I look at people like you who are doing so well in your career in terms of being able to recognize opportunities and knowing when to jump, I guess the first question I'd want to ask you is how did you know when it's time to switch agencies or offices?
That's a really good question. I think sometimes it's a matter of, what's going on in your personal life, or even like balancing work-life balance with your active duty partner or whatever it is. But for me, the indicator was I was getting too comfortable. I knew what to expect. I really felt like I was a well-oiled machine in my role, and it started to become something where I was getting a little complacent and just doing the same task over and over again, but not really expanding myself, challenging myself to learn more, to be uncomfortable, to try something new, to be challenged. And so that's when I decided to shift over to OASH. And there was a really great new opportunity that was presented to me to build a corporate recruitment function that had never been established within that office. And I love working in social media. I love working with job seekers, just the whole social side of recruiting. So I was like, okay, like I think I needed to take the leap of faith and transition to something new.
No, that's awesome. I think it takes a level of self-awareness to know and a willingness to be uncomfortable. So I appreciate that about you. And I think in all of the interviews I've done, anytime somebody has, progressed in their career like that, those are two traits that they share with you, which is, they have a level of self-awareness to know that, oh, I think I could be doing more. And then that comfort that you all have with discomfort is amazing. Where, you're like, I don't have to be the smartest person in the room right now. I'll get there, but I'm just ready for a new challenge. I think that is awesome. And as I was mentioning, Tracy, when I last spoke to her, was in Germany, and so she was very impacted by the Detto. Um, and I know that you were following, the White House MOA signing between the DoD and the State Department last week because we were chatting a little bit about it. But a lot of people understand that it was a milestone for military spouses, especially military spouses working for the federal government, who could potentially be moved overseas. But I don't think they got to hear a lot about personal stories about the Detto. So I wondered if you would mind, sharing a little bit about the impact that Detto had on your career.
Okay, definitely. I don't even know where to start sometimes with this because there are other spouses that still come to me. They network and they figure out that I was over there, and they ask, how did you keep your job? What worked for you? Where did it get, stalled? And oh, I have this very specific question about security. Can you help me? So that in itself is just, I just think it shows how important it was for this DETO agreement to get updated and revised, because there were a lot of issues that I ran into. I'll start, basically with, I was very proactive. I didn't wait around and just hope that I'd get to start working overseas one day. As soon as my husband mentioned that we might be moving to Germany, I immediately told my direct line supervisor, and I was like, hey, I'm just letting you know, in the next 6 to 8 months, I might be moving to Germany. How do you feel about that? Do you think there's still space on the team for me? If not, let's talk about transition. And thankful enough, I had an extremely supportive supervisor who was like, we want to retain you. Let's start figuring out the steps we need to take and see if it's possible for us to do this. And so we started the legwork months before we even got our orders, right? And so kind of planting that seed in your leadership's mind and just making them aware and building that trust, I think is key. So I did that, and I got approvals from NIH to work overseas. And then we started to get into some more challenging things like the training requirements before you go, working with your larger agency. Like for NIH, we report to the Department of Health and Human Services. So if you work at a sub-agency, you have to have your, I'd call it your mothership department, sign off on as well. And so working through all of that, I felt like I had all my ducks in a row when we moved to Germany. And then really where things started to get challenging was the security side, the side where we had to start collaborating with the Department of State and then also the embassy, because things got convoluted. Things were not explained, very clearly to me, especially with the security side. So I had to go on leave without pay because I did not have a signed DETO agreement. I did not have the approvals from the embassy. So I was scrambling to get a Department of State point of contact that I could lean on to better understand the steps that I needed to take in order to get approved to work. And so the DOS came out to our property. We lived off post, and they did a security review of our home. And, we were already approved by the DOD to live in that home. It was deemed safe. My husband's active duty. So according to DOD, everything was fine. But I didn't fall under DOD at the time. I fell under Department of State because I was a GS employee. So in, the instance of an emergency, they want to make sure you're safe. Well, all of these security requirements came back. And to be honest, it was almost $20,000 worth of security requirements that they listed out. They didn't give us a point of contact for those security requirements. So I scrambled with my landlord, and thank goodness we had such a good relationship with our landlord, and he was German. So he knew German companies, and we got on the phone. So we had to install a security system. We had to install blast proof film onto our windows. We had to change locks. Honestly, it was kind of crazy. I did not believe that I had to do all those things, but it took months and months for those installations to happen. And my agency didn't pay for any of it because there was not a budget line item for them to do so. And that was never in the agreement. So, my husband and I had to decide, are we going to fork up all this money, all this cash? Because in Germany, they want cash. They don't do credit cards. They're like,
Right.
are we going to fork up this cash, or am I going to lose my job? And so we had to weigh the pros and cons of that. So that's just one of many challenges that we faced. It was quite a season, but I will say in the end, after a lot of, just pushing back and forth and demanding answers and just really continuing to tell myself, I'm going to keep my job. I'm going to keep my job. This is going to work out. This is going to work out. It finally did. And so I went off of leave without pay. And then thankfully, I retained my job. I did stay on base salary, unfortunately, so I no longer got locality pay that I was receiving stateside, which, also was a drastic pay cut for me. But in the end, my TSP was good. I didn't, have a break in service, and those were the things that were most important to me.
Yeah, I mean, that is an insane story and journey that you had to do to keep your job. And I wish it was an anomaly, but I feel like it's not. Because, you and I've spoken to other federal spouses, and, they help other people navigate the system. And I mean, it's clear that advocacy played a huge role in your career continuity. You didn't give up. And I don't know if other spouses are just like, forget it, this is too much. I will just travel while we're overseas. I can't do this anymore. But if they do want to advocate for themselves, what advice would you give them? I mean, what advice would you give to military spouses who are also facing roadblocks?
Such a good question, and I think every family needs to kind of have a game plan going into situations like this. Like, okay, what are we willing to sacrifice and what are we not willing to sacrifice? And for us, we were willing to sacrifice a large sum of money so that in the long run, I got to, retain my job because my career means a lot to me. There are some situations where maybe people don't have cash on hand like that and they don't have a choice. And that's why it's so unfortunate, because sometimes you can say all you want in your head, we're going to make this work. And then you really do get a roadblock that you just can't overcome. But for me, I would say advocacy is number one. You have got to align yourself with people who will help you, people who understand their jobs, people who can, be an advocate on your behalf. And so, we work closely with some people that Adam was employed by, right? So we went to his department. We were like, how do we fix this? How can we, make sure that I could, keep my job? And then within the Department of State, I started emailing lots of different people. And when I realized that there was someone that was going to help me, I started calling them. And I asked them, like, let's have a phone conversation about this. Who else do you know that can help me with this process? Do you know anyone at the embassy? So you really have to be unafraid to, advocate for yourself, because at the end of the day, you did nothing wrong, right? All you're doing is you're supporting your spouse, you're moving to a new country, and you're trying to take care of your family. And so I think that is enough said to advocate for yourself. And yeah, I would just say be very, very organized and have your facts ready, because sometimes you might talk to one person and then 2 weeks later you realize you should have been talking to the other person, and you have to catch that other person up on everything that's been going on. So if you can give them dates and timelines and facts, like, this is what has happened so far, this is what I need, this is what I don't have, I need a signature for this, how can you help me? It saves you so much heartache and time. So I would just say, try to be as organized as possible, but also just try to have that positive outlook, like, this will work, this is going to happen, and kind of be your own coach. Almost like if you've ever played sports, you might, lose a couple games, but you keep playing, you keep going back, you keep practicing, and you keep trying to get that win. So.
No, absolutely. And you shared so much right there. And I'm just thinking in my mind about the big takeaways that people should remember from your talk. And one of them is, when you talk about advocacy, you're not talking about you should try once and then give up if you get a no. Because it sounds like you were emailing a lot of people at the Department of State until you found someone who would help you.
Yes.
So when you're talking about advocacy, a big part of advocacy is persistence, playing the long game, right? And so I appreciate that. And then another one I heard from you was the importance of documentation, where take notes. Like, maybe you have an Excel spreadsheet that has the date of communication, the person you communicate with, and notes, so that when you get to the next person and they ask questions, you can go back, oh, well, I spoke to Jane Smith on this date at this time in this office. This is where we left off. She recommended that I contact you. I think that's smart. And I think that is at minimum what you guys should consider if you enter into the advocacy part, and to advocate for your career. One, find someone who will help you. Don't give up just because the first person gives you a no. Two, document everything. And then I want to go back a little bit further, and I really appreciate that you said this, which is, it may not make sense for everyone because they may not have the money on hand that's required to mitigate some of these issues. But you guys did a SWOT analysis, the strengths, weakness, opportunities, and threats, a SWOT analysis for your family and what it would mean to you guys if you chose not to continue a career, or chose just to, get out while, just while you were overseas. And you mentioned that your retirement would have taken a hit. And so I think that is, again, a long-term vision for where you're going. And a lot of spouses, I think federally employed spouses are probably better at this, because if you work for the federal government, you probably know that you're hoping for a full career. But like a lot of military spouses are not as good about, I don't think we're as good about placing retirement savings as one of those elements of things that we should value when we do that SWOT analysis. But it's a very big part of that analysis, I think, because you get compounding interest when you start earlier, and you can't replace that, and you can't replace time. You can't get time back. So I appreciate that you shared that with everyone. I know you shared a lot of information, but I have to think that you have so much more to share, because you have been in the HR game for a long time in the federal government. So I think the last question I would ask you is, what questions should I have asked from the vantage point of a military spouse looking to work in the federal government? If you could put on your HR hat and just let us know, what questions should I have asked you?
Yeah, well, that's a great question. I think if there was a question that a spouse should ask that maybe is going to be in my shoes or is in similar shoes, to what I've experienced, the question would be, how do I make those special connections that can help me advance my career? Like, I think that sometimes we get bogged down on perfecting our resume, or perfecting our LinkedIn profile, or doing a lot of these things that do nothing to connect us to other people. And at the end of the day, I think networking is so, so important. And not networking like you just randomly blast someone and say, like, I need a job, but networking like, hey, I'm moving to Germany soon. I'm looking for some volunteer opportunities. Like, who runs, the spouses club there? Or, hey, I have a degree in finance. Can I help somebody with, their book somewhere? And then that way it's not about, giving away your time for free, like to work for free. It's about meeting those people that are in those circles, so that you can understand what those needs are in those communities. And then you can start framing, your resume around that, or then have that conversation about, oh yeah, I've been looking for a job in this. I would love to have employment here. So it's all about who you know. It really is, because I would say for me in the federal government, I got my foot in the door because I had a friend who knew a hiring manager, and I had no idea what a pathways announcement was. I didn't know what the GS steps were. I didn't even know what the NIH stood for. But I knew someone that knew someone. And that has landed me, a 12-year career in the federal government. And I have been so fortunate to retain my position. So that's what I would say. I would say, resumes are important, LinkedIn profiles are important, but more importantly, it is really establishing relationships, building trust with people, and showing people what your value add is.
No, that's awesome. And I think that's a really great reminder, because a lot of people forget that networking works in the public sector as well as the private sector. Like, I think they think that, oh, because everything's transparent, it's on USA Jobs, there's no networking to be done. They're wrong. Like, so I appreciate that reminder. Traci, it has been such a pleasure catching up with you. And I know that we could talk about this all day long. So if you think of anything that you would want to ask Traci, go ahead and submit your questions in the comment section. When we post this on Facebook, we'll check the comments. So if you have any questions, just post them there, and we'll make sure Traci gets those questions. And I want to just thank our friends over at USAA for making these conversations possible, because we are learning more and more about the amazing work that spouses are doing all over the globe and in every industry imaginable. So if you have a great story to tell, I hope you will apply for your own highlight, and we would love to interview you as well. Thanks, Traci, and we hope to see you guys here again next week. Bye, guys.
Thank you, Sue. Thank you so much.